and welcome to the Oddity Archive, or as I sometimes like to call it, the House of Fail. Now, usually that means the failures and misfires of others, hence oddity, but today it actually means my own personal failures. And that also means that this is going to be the definitive your mileage may vary sort of episode. So, as I implied, what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at some of the oversights, factual screw ups, and just all around personal fails of the 60 plus episodes of Archive to date, and I'm going to do it out of character. Because even crazy old Benny Boy needs a holiday once in a while. So, what we're going to do here is there's going to be two lists. We're going to have the top 5 factual fails, and we're going to have the top 5 personal fails. And I guess it's appropriate. Today is Thanksgiving, and, it seems like a good time for turkeys, be them literal or figurative. So let's just dive right in, huh? Number 5, Format Wars Volume 2. This is kind of a minor one, but it's one that still, as of this episode, draws the occasional complaint, despite my best attempts at setting the record straight. In a lazy, stupid oversight on my part when showing the stats for the German Telefunken TED system, I accidentally mislabeled what should have read either German or Germany as Dutch. Here's what happened. The official name of the German mark was/is Deutschmark, or as American prairie boys like myself are prone to saying, Dutch, so the words tend to come out as Dutch mark. With the word Dutch flying around in my head, I inadvertently typed in Dutch instead of German when referring to the TED's country of origin and currency. Now, will the hate mail please stop? Number 4. Cube Interactive TV. Of the significant original programs shown on the Warner Cable Cube Interactive TV system, I opted not to mention one of them for 2 reasons. One, it didn't survive past Cube's experimental broadcasts in March of 1977, and 2, there were only 4 episodes made. This was Cube's failed attempt at a game show called How Do You Like Your Eggs? In retrospect, this was the wrong move, because despite my reasons for not discussing it, it's a nice, all-encompassing example of everything good and bad about the Cube system. Now, this series was hosted by Bill Cullen, of pre-Bob Barker The Price is Right fame amongst many other game shows, and was underwhelming. The show, that is. Indeed, to be perfectly honest, I found it to be a dull, overly complicated Family Feud knockoff. Now, I don't think it'd be wise to do a full review of this show in this context, so I would encourage viewers to search YouTube for How Do You Like Your Eggs and watch it in all its tedious, head-scratching glory. Number 3. The Max Headroom Incident of 1987. At the time, the quality of copies of the Max Headroom Incident flying around the internet were rather subpar. With that, I took it upon myself to try and clean up the sound of the hijacking to try and better decipher Max's ramblings. Despite my preemptive caveat about the accuracy of the translations, there are some moments that have stuck with me in the wrong way since the episode. There is one line of my transcription that I now know was inaccurate, and there's another one that I've grown to question. At this point in the attempted transcriptions, I said, I know now this is inaccurate. Max actually said, looks like you got footprints on it. Which makes sense, because it would logically follow up the line about my brother is wearing the other one and it's dirty. Towards the end, I note the phrase, oh do it, bitch. Now, I definitely hear oh do it, but have grown to question whether or not he really said bitch. Oh well, it makes for a more interesting narrative, I guess.
As far as I can tell, a massive electric shock, he died instantly.
The generator? Oh, you're always so careful.
Number 2. VHS Vault Volume 1, Aimvest Video. I really screwed up the history lesson in this episode. I mentioned that the seeds of AimVest Video could be traced to Audio Fidelity Records, which is true, but the history of Audio Fidelity Records goes much farther back than the Happy Chipmunks / Hamsters records, of which there were more than just the two I discussed. Another fail. Audio Fidelity Records was started around 1955 and was originally based out of New York City. The move to Rahway, New Jersey didn't happen until probably sometime in the 70s. They issued some of the first ever stereo albums in 1957 and also helmed releases by the likes of Louis Armstrong and Al Hirt. In 1965, Audio Fidelity's original owner sold the company, and the history gets a little fuzzy after that. Starting sometime in the 70s, something weird happened at Audio Fidelity. Though they still released some new material and had at least 2 artists signed to their roster, this once credible label was now spending more time and effort issuing dubious Beatles compilations and probably unlicensed rock and roll oldies compilations. By 1986 or so, Audio Fidelity more or less ceased to exist. They reissued a few Christmas albums under their Holiday Records imprint during the 80s and early 90s, and that was about it. As far as who did and who didn't cross over to AimVest Video is, at least as of this recording, anyone's guess. And the home of the #1 fail in archive history to date is shortwave DXing. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why I am always so publicly leery of tackling topics outside of my wheelhouse. Radio, even as I mentioned in the episode, is not really a strength or particularly strong interest of mine. Nonetheless, I figured I could learn it well enough to get by. Anyway, even in my attempt at the most basic, beginner-friendly discussion of the radio frequency spectrum, I still managed to get something very important very wrong. I managed to completely mess up the ranges of the long and medium wave bands. According to more than a couple of our more radio-inclined viewers, the frequency bands are roughly as follows. Long wave is roughly 1 to 300 kilohertz, medium wave is something to the effect of 500 to 1600 kilohertz, or 1.6 megahertz, and shortwave picks up where medium wave leaves off and heads on up to 30 megahertz. There's also some more nitpicky stuff wrong with the episode, like what is and isn't the most common stuff to pick up via shortwave, or some of the finer points of the BBC's broadcasts, but I don't think it really changes anything, except to make my take on the topic sound even more wishy-washy than it already does. So there. Number 5. Scary logos and other nostalgic video terrors. Okay, I realize this is one that a lot of archive viewers seem to really love, of which I'm glad, don't get me wrong, but when I look back at this one, it just seems to fall into this strange netherworld between the early slideshow format of the archive and the more recent, more box segment driven style. It was like I couldn't really commit to either sticking with the old way of doing things or changing things up. There's blackout segments where a box segment would have been much better. There's unaccompanied logos that would have benefited from some commentary, verbal or text, and it's just an all-around awkwardly paced episode to boot. It does have its moments, though, I'll grant you that. Ha! Missed me! Ow! Peaches. Dum-dum. Number 4. Local TV Volume 1. This was the episode that got me to make the executive decision to bleep out full-on expletives. In other words, if it's too strong for primetime, free, over-the-air TV, it's too strong for the archive. I mean, I'm not against profanity in other people's shows, that's their prerogative, but it just seemed extra mean on my part to leave it in, and segments like Count Scary wound up sounding harsher than intended. Having said that, I think the bleeped out words kinda create their own little brand of humor. It's also kind of fun to just arbitrarily bleep out occasional non-expletives like d too. The exceptions to my rule are when it's not a proper archive video, like a commentary or perhaps even this, or if it's a word that only sounds like an expletive in context but really isn't. For example, in the infomercials episode, I left a deliberate mispronunciation of shit, or sheet as it came out, intact. Number 3. VHS Vault Volume 3, Gambling Videos. This one seemed like a slam dunk topic. It had the odd personalities, the con artists, and the lure of easy money all going for it. Problem was, I think I latched on a little too hard onto the con artist angle, and the riffs in this one, which of course make up the bulk of the episode, were just a little too cynical and at times downright mean-spirited. I mean, I may take a below-the-belt swipe at someone from time to time, but usually only if I know, as a writer, that it'll come back around to haunt me later in the episode. Now, I haven't quite closed the door on taking another stab at these videos, but it mainly hinges on finding a more conceptually sound way of looking at it, and having any riffs be a little more balanced. Number 2. The Max Headroom incident of 1987. Okay, this one might be a bit of a cheat. At the time of this episode, it was the pilot, I'd never attempted to make a full-on video of any sort, nor did I have any real idea of what angle I wanted Archive to take. The going trend at the time, of course, was the whole angry reviewer motif, and I admittedly just kinda blindly followed along. In other words, the Max Headroom incident hits every conceivable pothole that a first video can hit. I will say this much in my own defense, though. It was my best effort at the time, and I also think that it's incredibly rare for anybody to find their voice in most anything right out of the gate. You have to start somewhere, and I was no different. And the number one personal fail in Archive to date is Captain Midnight / Vrillin. As far as I'm concerned, this is the all-time worst episode of Archive. Save for the Poetry Corner sketch during the Vrillin half, just about everything about this episode seems completely off to me. In my attempts at being even-handed towards Captain Midnight himself, I think I managed to pretty well defang what could have been a much more interesting script. With regards to the Vrillin half of the episode, I still get the odd comment / complaint that the audio of the hijacking is fake. To the best of my knowledge, the audio is real. But having said that, it'd also be nice to know where the existing audio originated from. Was it from someone involved? Was it from someone who'd been, for whatever reason, making an audio recording of the newscast? Was it being simulcast on the radio? Needless to say, all the missing pieces kind of bug me, and I failed to mention those. So, there you go. Some final thoughts here. I think that I'd been making good progress in the production of Archive in the previous few episodes, but this one pretty much wiped all that progress out. And this was also the episode in which I learned the hard way to never try and cut a voiceover at 8 a.m., because apparently I'm just not quite sharp yet at that hour. Oh well. If nothing else, I think it got me to refocus and do a better job starting with the next episode, which was pay TV cable. Today, the captain still runs his store in Ocala, Florida. And we'll be right back. Well, there's a bonus fail for you. The light just failed. So anyway, that's it for today's Archive. Join me next time when I guess I get to do that again, don't I?
And then it happened. Something happened. And I felt so bad that I cried and cried. Yes, I felt so bad. 'Cause I really tried.
Oops, you made a mistake, that's all. And making mistakes is never fun to say. Oops, I made a mistake, that's all. And mistakes can happen to anyone.
Well, that's it for today's archive. Join me next time when I try to remember my damn lines.